Hello everyone, Sobrax Gaming here, and today I thought I'd talk about Fatalis and just share some of my thoughts about him. He's been out for a few months now. I would say that the general reception has been really good. I'm glad everyone enjoys the fight. There hasn't been a lot of complaining about how hard he is. It seems like after Elytreon, most people seem to kind of get the idea that, like, okay, it's Fatalis. He should be really hard. People shouldn't be able to just breeze through him. So it seems like welcome difficulty, which I really like. I'm glad to see that within the community. It's not people complaining as much, venting their frustrations for sure. But anyway, without further ado, the first thing I wanted to note was how he kind of compares to the older generations. So I didn't play Fatalis in the first game. I did not have Monster Hunter 1, of course. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have played it, but in any case, but I did play him a lot in Generations, and I will tell you, from that experience, he is a very similar fight, which I was shocked by. I did not expect him to be that similar. And what I mean is that I kind of expected him to be reworked. When I saw Safi Jiva, I assumed that was going to be the groundwork for Fatalis. A couple of reasons. One, mainly, was that I don't know for sure, but I do know that Fatalis kind of moves similar to Legiacris, and that they really struggled to put that into the Monster Hunter world. If you ever saw, for example, I forget if it was the NDCC 2018 conference that they had. But anyway, so they showed a demo for Monster Hunter World, and it looked pretty terrific, and also a lot bigger. If you ever see the forest map, people wish that that forest map was the same size as it was in the game, because in the demo it was way bigger and totally awesome. But yeah, they had Legiacris in the demo, and they basically said right afterwards, we can't make this work. His belly is too close to the ground, and they couldn't find a way to get that to work within like the hills and the bumps in the game. So I always thought that Fatalis kind of moved around a little bit like Legiacris. I don't know if it's the same model, but so that was one reason I didn't think it was going to be the same. But also, there is something that people don't really talk about when you fight Fatalis, and it's that you're basically fighting him. You are like 90% of the time, you're kind of the gooch destroyer. You attack his gooch the whole fight, or at least in the old games, you attack his gooch or his crotch or whatever 80% of the time. And I didn't think about it the first few times I fought him. I did think about it the first few times I fought him. The first few times I fought him, I thought, like, this is kind of weird, but I can't attack his legs. I can't attack his tail. His forearms are impervious, or they make you recoil. You can kind of hit his belly. You definitely want to hit his head when you get the chance, but for the most part, you're hitting his gooch. And for the first few times you fight him, you're kind of like, okay, this is kind of weird. You forget about it after about seven or eight fights, but for the first few fights, you're kind of like there's no other monster whose gooch or crotch or whatever you attack as much as Fatalis, and I thought that was just kind of funny for the be-all end-all, this mega apocalyptic dragon to just, yeah, I'm just sitting there destroying his crotch the whole time. So that was the second reason I thought, oh man, this fight has to be reworked. This doesn't make sense, or at least it's kind of funny. But yeah, also, yeah, the third reason I thought was that they didn't show us any footage at all. Not really. So I thought for sure they weren't showing us footage because they didn't want to show us that the fight looked pretty much totally different from Generations Ultimate and that it wasn't going to be the same. But yeah, for the most part, I was totally wrong. They kept a lot of the same things. A lot of what they did was just polish, and they did change the hit zones a little bit, where I kind of did appreciate the fact, but it was annoying that in Generations Ultimate, the hitboxes are, not for the monster, but I should say the hit zones were really, really bad. You couldn't attack its tail. You didn't want to attack its tail. It would do no damage, and even if you had purple sharpness, it would bounce off. The arms, like the back legs were like slightly better, but also really hard. The forearms were, yeah, you didn't want to hit the forearms. All you wanted to hit was the belly and the head. And so the first thing I noticed definitely with this fight was that they changed it up a bit. They changed it up. They said, okay, we'll let you, like, you definitely want to attack the belly and the head, but we'll let you attack the arms, and we'll let you attack the back legs if you want to be safer. I appreciated that they balanced that out a little bit. It makes it a little less strenuous, because I'll tell you, from Generations Ultimate, I've had groups of 4 where we beat Fatalis in 6 minutes, and everyone knew what they were doing. Everyone went for the head. Everyone went for the belly. Everyone went for the gooch, and they hit all the right spots at all the right times. And yeah, 6 minutes, 10 minutes, really clean, really efficient. And I've had groups of 4 people that run it in like 30, and they do not hit the head when they get the chance. And what they do is they go for the back legs or the tail the whole time, or the arms, or they run around a lot. And yeah, so you'd be sitting there fighting in Generations Ultimate, you'd be fighting Fatalis for like half an hour just to lose. You'd hit it with 2 Dragonators, and it was because your team didn't really understand to hit the head. They definitely kept that in this game. You want to hit the head as soon as you can, as much as you can. They did it a little differently, though. So when you hit the head in this one, it actually weakens him. That was their way of making it a necessity. Because damage-wise, you definitely can get by just hitting him in the belly, but when it hits phase 3 and he goes in the final form and his fire does a lot of damage, it teaches you, like, either you're going to dodge everything or you're going to hit his head. So I thought that was very interesting how they decided to kind of make you hit the head, but for a different reason altogether. Yeah, other than that, they cleaned up a lot of his hit zones, or hit boxes, I should say. A lot like Alatreon, where you did not ever feel like he got cheap hits on you. There was always a visual cue. There was always, I think the best example for Alatreon are his lightning hitboxes. If you're not in the lightning hitbox, if you're not where the lightning is going to strike, it's not going to hit you. Whereas in the past, the hitboxes would just be a little more generous to the monster, so you wouldn't... The visual cue would tell you you're not in it, but you'd get hit by it anyway, and people get pissed off. So I feel like they did that a lot with Fatalis, where they cleaned up the hitboxes, and they weren't as cheap. You could always see it. You could always see that he's hitting you. So yeah, I think that's a great change. They should do that for all the monsters. No one likes getting hit by invisible stuff just because that's the hitbox, but there isn't a visual tell for it as much. There was one move in particular with Fatalis that was really annoying back in the day. I don't know how to define it. It's probably the equivalent now would be when he moves his head to the right or to the left, and then there's this delayed reaction. That move was like a one-hit kill in Generations Ultimate, and it was this big cloud. And it was, this big cloud of fire dust, and it would happen really quick, and you wouldn't exactly be able to see it, so people would get frustrated. I would get frustrated by that. You would eventually learn, it had a bigger tell, so that's how they balanced it out, but it was still, you couldn't exactly see it, and so you could tell they definitely thought design-wise, we want everyone to understand every hit or every move that this new Fatalis does. So, you don't see people complaining about like getting hit by invisible stuff all the time, which is really nice. Now, while we're on the topic of combat, I thought it was very relevant to point out some of the things that they did in this fight that I don't think get mentioned a lot, and I think should, because I think they did an absolutely fantastic job. And what they were going for, at least partially, was trying to be kind of, make it a big finale. And not just, just that it's Fatalis and it's a big finale and all that. And the whole thing itself is grandiose with the music and all that. But they kind of wanted people to approach the fight however they wanted. So if you're a skilled hunter and you can just attack the thing with the weapon the whole time, that's great. But being a great hunter in the world of Monster Hunter is not supposed to always be about just hitting it with your sword and bashing it over the head with your hammer. A lot of times what they want players to do is to be a little creative with the environment. Back in base game, I mean, they failed to implement some of this stuff, unfortunately, but, they had poison food, they had paralysis meat, and that was supposed to get monsters to eat it and to get paralyzed and poisoned. They wanted you to think about things. They wanted you to use the vine traps in Ancient Forest, or scatter nuts. If you knock them down, you could stun a monster. They wanted you to use the environment, and unfortunately that stuff kind of goes away the more and more you play, because you just get so good with your weapon that you don't really need to use any of it. But I think for this fight they wanted to call back to that kind of idea. So what they had you do, you had people using the ghillie mantle to load up the cannons. You had smoke bombs, using next to the roaming ballista. Temporal mantle and rocksteady mantles are perfect for using heavy artillery and shooting at it. These are the kinds of things that, they didn't want it to be just using your weapon. They wanted you to kind of use all the skills of a hunter, which I find admirable. I think that's really neat that they tried to encompass more ways of fighting Fatalis than just bashing it over the head with the weapon. Which brings me to my next point, and kind of the clutch claw. So if you observe solo runs of Behemoth or Ancient Leshen or what have you in the older games or in the base game, you'll notice that the meta for base world Monster Hunter kind of revolved around attacking and evading. And I loved it, but I can understand from a conceptual point of view why they might think that feels a little limited. So what they decided to do was, at least in Iceborne, was that you should use your clutch claw as the best evasion tool. And so for some of Fatalis' attacks, the best place to be the best thing to do is not to try and use iframes and to roll or to Superman dive. The best thing to do is to use your clutch claw. When he goes backwards and shoots his fire for 6 or 7 seconds and forward, and he wiggles his head around, the best thing to do is to tenderize his head and or flint shot him into the wall. When he starts pouring fire onto the ground, you can run out of it and get away from it, or you can clutch claw into his body or his head, and you can get a tenderize. Same thing for a lot of when he shoots fire downwards and then he flicks his head upwards. Again, the best place to be is clutch clawing. And I do actually really like the kind of experimentation that they're trying to do, because again, just go watch base world runs on Behemoth and you'll see it is literally just longsword or dual blades and attack, evade, attack, evade, attack, forward sight slash. I like it, but I can understand that they wanted it to be a little different. They wanted people to be a little more involved. So what they decided to do, and Volcana is a perfect example of an iceborne monster where, it pours ice on the ground. You can clutch claw onto its head. You can either evade it, run away from it, or when it pours ice onto the ground, well, there's two attacks when it pours ice on the ground. There's one where he flies up into the air, shoots it straight down onto the ground. And that's the icicles attack. That's it's kind of like one of those triple explosion attacks like Xeno'jiiva has. Yeah, you can clutch claw into its head or its body and get a free tenderize. And that's actually the more efficient way to do damage. It's not more efficient to just evade. And it's the same thing when it just stands there and starts pouring ice on the ground and freezes your feet. The best thing to do, you can go attack its back legs, or you can clutch claw into his wings and get a damage and tenderize. And you'll see me do that, in some of these clips too, where Fatalis starts pouring ice onto the ground, and I use it as a clutch claw opportunity. they wanted to change how runs or how people played a little bit and just make it a little more variated between, or not just having, attack evade the whole time. They wanted people to do something else, and I think that was a really wonderful choice on their part. At first I didn't like Clutch Claw, but when you get really good at it and you start to understand, like, you don't have to wait for just claggers or stuns to get tenderizes, but you can actually do it in the middle of some of their moves if you know what moves to wait for. I think that was a really wonderful choice on Capcom's part. So when it comes to combining all these things on Capcom's part, I think, yeah, it was just A+. You can use all the, the mantles, the decos, the smoke bombs, the poison bombs. Poison bombs aren't that great but for this fight, but the roaming ballistas and the ballistay to get knockdowns. I mean, they make it so that if you want to be like a jack of all trades hunter and do all these different things when you fight it, you can totally do that, and it's totally valid. And not only that, but yeah, like I said, or how I pointed out, it involves the Clutch Claw in certain creative ways, like other monsters did, that reward you for being smarter. Like, if you know you can Clutch Claw during this move, you will be rewarded for it. And yeah, I applaud them for the effort. I know a lot of people hate Clutch Claw. I hated it before the buff they gave to it. I hated a minute and a half tenderizes. I thought that was so short, but now that it's 3 minutes, and they have Clutch Claw boost on your build, I think it's pretty good. It's pretty rewarding, and I definitely don't hate it anymore. It's definitely, maybe it's not my favorite thing, but I do appreciate the attempt that they tried to do to not just coast, but they really tried to innovate combat in Iceborne compared to Base World. Now, my main issue is pretty much, it's not even really an issue with the fight. It's kind of what surrounds the fight, and what surrounds the fight kind of forced them to behave with the fight in certain ways. The best examples I can come up with off the top of my head, or I should say example, is just Ultimate Weapon from Final Fantasy VIII, or Omega Weapon from Final Fantasy VIII. Or Fatalis, I should say, from Generations Ultimate. He's not a part of the story. When you go and fight an optional boss like Omega Weapon or Fatalis, or Crimson Fatalis, or White Fatalis, they're not parts of the story. They're kind of optional tests to the players that they can do. And so when you make a boss like that, developers feel free to go crazy. They feel free to make a monster insanely difficult, insanely hard, because that's what it's there for. It's not for everyone to beat. It's not for everyone to destroy and win so they can see the end of the story. Those bosses are there so to test the few players that can really actually fight those monsters. So I love Fatalis, and I even love the Fatalis in the story, but I feel like he wasn't super hard, and that was because he was a part of the story, and actually he was the end of the story, so they didn't want it to be where people couldn't get to the end of the game because they couldn't beat the final boss. They want everyone to experience beating it, so yeah, they decided, we're just not going to make it insanely hard. I still think it's fun and challenging, but it took me about 2 to 3 hours to solo. Granted, I'm someone who could solo Behemoth in base game, so it's not necessarily like I'm just an average player. I wouldn't say so. But I feel like that's kind of an issue with the narrative around Fatalis, is not necessarily he did not quite add up to who he was in the past, where he's really not a monster you're supposed to be able to beat. They make him beatable, but they make him extremely, extremely difficult. Most players can't beat him. Most players, they could get groups of 4 for 10 hours and not get a successful run. His armor isn't that great in Generations Ultimate, I don't think, but the point is that it's there for the people that really, really want to test themselves, which is why I love the Arc-Tempered Fatalis mod. It is exactly kind of what I wanted from Fatalis. I wanted something kind of ridiculous. I wanted, like with Arc-Tempered Fatalis mod, he does like 30 to 50% more damage on each hit, or at least most hits. So it's almost impossible not to go in and without Fortify, because he'll kill you in one hit. A lot of people might think that's really cheap. I understand that. I think, they could think that's really bogus. To be fair, if you go in with Divine Blessing, Fire Resistance, Tool Specialist, I mean, you can get a lot of defensive skills that help you survive his first hit, but if you're going to go in without any defense, Arc-Tempered Fatalis kills you in one hit with a lot of moves, which is what I really like. So, and I feel like that's the way Fatalis should be, with how good his gear is and how good his weapons are, and and just the way the monster is. He is the apocalyptic end all be all of the Monster Hunter universe. So that's just my take on it. Sorry, I hope I didn't sound too elitist there. It's not that I don't want people to be able to beat it, or for people to experience the end of the story. It's just that, I like having, at least, after 1,000 or so hours of Monster Hunter, the reason why I play is to have these big challenges. I'm not a huge speed runner. I try and do speed runs. I do okay. Like, before the Fatalis armor came out, I got under 10 minutes with Alatreon. I'm more interested in having monsters that are unconquerable or nearly unconquerable and beating them, more so than I am interested in like speedrunning times and getting killing things faster and faster. So that's just me, and that's the only thing about Iceborne, and unfortunately with Fatalis it seems to lack, is like just these extreme challenges. And that's one of the things I absolutely loved about Generations Ultimate, because I keep comparing it to that game, I guess, is that with G rank 4 and Fatalis and variant monsters, they were all like really, really difficult to solo, and I absolutely loved it. I didn't love the game mechanics, but I loved that, like, if you wanted a real challenge, there was probably, oh gosh, even with endgame gear, there's probably like 30 to 40 monsters at least that will really kick your butt. And unfortunately, in Iceborne, it's not all Fatalis' fault, but in Iceborne, there aren't too many monsters that'll do that. And oddly enough, still, some of the most challenging monsters are the high rank ones. If you've tried to solo Ancient Leshen with Master Rank gear, I did it before Fatalis came out, so I did it with the Safi Jiva gear, but this still took me like 25 to 30 minutes. This is crazy, but that's a high rank quest, and that takes a lot longer than the Master Rank stuff on average. And it was a similar thing with Extreme Behemoth. I was finally able to solo it with Master Rank gear, even with Safi Jiva and Alatreon weapons and crit element and all this stuff. My first run that I actually beat Extreme Behemoth still took me like 25 some minutes, and I still barely did it. I just like that kind of challenge, and I like having the option to have that kind of challenge. I like that kind of option of being able to test myself like that as a player. And unfortunately, I think normal Fatalis, he's fun and challenging, but he's not that kind of challenge. And this is why I think that the EX quest packs are just absolutely terrific. I think the modded monsters are great, and I look forward to it in the future of having all these. Hopefully the modding community does it, but just all these extra arc-tempered, high damaging monsters that can give us the experience that we want. We can either play the base game, which there's nothing wrong with it. I love the base game. Iceborne is my favorite game of all time for sure. So I love the base game, but it also they give us the option to play to our heart's content against monsters that definitely aren't for the main population of players to play. So yeah, I didn't mean to say that. Um, the Fatalis has to be some insanely hard for everyone. I do appreciate that there's a version of him in the game that a lot of people can beat for the story. You get more lives, you get 5 lives for the special assignment, so it's nice for people that I want everyone to finish the story, but I do want that actual game to have like extreme behemoth level challenges that were just so crazy. I don't know if any of you, how many of you listening did Extreme Behemoth in the base game, but Extreme Behemoth in the base game, I had to play with 3 insanely good players. None of them were slouches. They were all incredibly good players, and we still lost most of the time. But having that kind of challenge gave us something really to strive for, and we were all really good, and we were all really excited that we won. So yeah, I want people to complete the Fatalis story, but I also want to have, without mods, the game be around, things like Extreme Behemoth, the things that really give you a sense of accomplishment. And you didn't have to fight Extreme Behemoth for any gear. You just get layered armor, and that was fine. But yeah, I just want more of those challenges, or wanted more of those challenges in Monster Hunter, and that's unfortunately what I think Capcom didn't quite give us. But yeah, so I don't know. Those are just some of my thoughts. I might make a video sometime in the future if I come up with any more things to say, or if I miss something or mispronounced something. Because I don't think this was the cleanest verbal video ever made on YouTube, but anyway, so yeah, those are just some of my thoughts. If you made it through the video, thanks for listening. Really appreciate it. Until next time, thanks for watching.